Welcome to today's discussion. We are going to explore a rather interesting idea. Is there a medicine that can cure the ailments of our minds? Yes, we have some material that discusses a certain psychological state that acts like an antidote. So, today's task is to understand what these poisons of the mind are and where their antidote can be found. That's an excellent starting point. At its core, there's a central metaphor here. Our greed and attachment to many things in the world, such as sensory pleasures, fame, and profit, are seen as a poison. Yes, like an addiction. This poison is the root of suffering. So, the key lies in how we identify and dissolve it. This metaphor is quite intriguing. In our daily lives, what poisons are we prone to? The material mentions things like the pursuit of food, possessions, and good reputation, described quite vividly as if our hearts are hung with hooks. When a hook is pulled, we experience pain, a very strong image. Exactly. This addiction metaphor is very apt. And that brief comfort we feel might actually be deepening the toxicity. The material even uses the example of Huo Yuanjia. Huo Yuanjia, although he was a martial arts master, after becoming addicted to opium, his health deteriorated. So, suffering can be said to be an inevitable reaction to being in a poisoned state. To detoxify, one must go through a rather difficult process, which the material calls enduring hardship. So, what exactly is the true antidote? The material consistently emphasizes two things: right wisdom, right view, and right thought. This sounds a bit abstract. How does it work in practical life? The material provides an example that I find quite illustrative. A person working in a hospital who witnesses severe consequences of improper eating every day, such as patients needing amputations. Because he personally saw this harm, coupled with continuous reflection and learning, a genuine sense of alarm arose in his mind. Naturally, he was then able to control his desire for food. This is how right view is generated through observation and contemplation, which then changes behavior. I see. So this antidote primarily relies on one's own clarity of perception and understanding. The material also mentions skillfully reciting mantras. How does this relate to understanding clearly? This is an interesting contrast. Reciting mantras may indeed have its power, that's true. But the material seems to place greater emphasis on understanding the principles, that is, truly grasping the fundamental truths of things through right view and right thought. Moreover, reciting mantras requires certain specific conditions, such as precise pronunciation and adherence to Sanskrit sounds, which also involves past karma, like not having created negative speech karma. However, establishing right view and right thought as the antidote feels more fundamental and universal. It requires us to have a connection with these principles. This idea of connection seems very important. The material states that the depth of this connection determines how much of the antidote we can access, understand, and even practice. So, how can we cultivate this connection? The material specifically mentions making offerings to the Triple Gem, which refers to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. According to the material's perspective, making offerings is seen as a way to cultivate good roots and deepen positive connections. Especially making offerings to the Buddha, because the Buddha is considered to be complete in both merit and wisdom. So, offering to him is like planting a seed that will allow one to attain the highest wisdom in the future, ultimately leading to enlightenment, which the material calls anattara, samyak, sambadhi. It's like tuning into a specific frequency. Yes, you can think of it that way, making it easier for you to receive the antidote's message. This is different from filial piety towards parents, which is primarily about repaying kindness. And the material also warns that if one creates negative karma towards the Dharma or virtuous teachers, it can severely damage this connection, hindering one's ability to receive the antidote. So, it sounds like connection is like a channel for receiving the antidote. The story of Yasodhara in the material is very interesting then. She had such a deep connection with the Buddha and was influenced by him for a long time, but at first, she struggled to keep up. Yet, she was eventually prophesied to become a Buddha in the future. What does her example tell us? Yasodhara's story indeed demonstrates the subtle, transformative power of long-term immersion. However, the material simultaneously emphasizes that the most fundamental and effective approach still relies on one's own active establishment and application of right view and right thought. This means constantly reflecting, observing, and contemplating. Relying purely on external immersion will be slower, and if there's still arrogance in the mind which the material calls mana, then the effect will be even more diminished. Alright, let's briefly summarize. The medicine that cures the ailments of sentient beings isn't some magical pill. It's actually a process of awakening. First, one must recognize the poisons of the mind, those addictive attachments. Then, one must diligently use the antidote of right wisdom and right thought to dissolve them. At the same time, it seems necessary to actively cultivate the connection that allows one to access these principles. The core message is probably this: the key to freedom from suffering is actually in our own hands. It lies in transforming our internal perception and actively choosing not to be led astray by those poisons. While great enlightened beings like Yasodhara may appear in the future, whether we can receive their guidance still depends on our own preparation and merit. And in the present, the scriptures, the Jingzheng, as the material calls them, are themselves a treasure trove that we can deeply explore to find the antidote. Finally, here's a question for you to continue pondering. The material distinguishes between external environmental conditioning and the internal, active establishment of right view and right thought. So, in the various information you encounter daily, and in your interactions with people, how do you determine what truly helps you stay clear-headed and acts as a beneficial catalyst? And what might, unbeknownst to you, be subtly deepening your attachments and requires special vigilance as a poison?